It's the 2022 World Cup. It's Brazil's players. Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Preview by Soccerphiles Canada. I'm Kevin.
And I'm Connor, and today we will be looking at Brazil's squad for the 2022
Short
World Cup.
version, please. End of the player-by-player section of the podcast, and now we move on to a discussion of the squads. But I think it's time to talk about the shirts we're wearing, Connor.
Yeah, well, I don't have anything particularly impressive. In fact, just a gray shirt, but you have a Brazil shirt, I see.
I do. It's one of the few team appropriate shirts I have. Most of the time, I'm kind of faking it just by doing the right color of the team if I can. But I think we should go back and call yours a referee's uniform to show how objective you are.
That's right. Objective and neutral is what I was going for.
Great. Let's take a look at some of the notes, and we'll actually return to some of the things we said at the top of the podcast, which were outtakes from the or takeaways from the previous podcast we did on Brazil. Do you want to talk us through the main titles?
Yeah. So the first topic was the question of whether Brazil is in a slump. What do you say about that?
Yeah, well, by anyone else's standards, we wouldn't call Brazil's record over the recent years a slump. In fact, most national teams would be delighted to have 3 quarterfinal finishes and then a 4th place finish as hosts. But by Brazil's standards, no World Cup title since 2002. And as I said, 3 quarterfinal finishes and 4th place finish as hosts. Would you call that a slump?
For Brazil, yeah, I agree. I mean, they're often ranked, if not first, second or third in the world. So they want to be reaching those, I would say finals in most tournaments they play in. So to not reach that and to get only as far as the quarterfinals, including as hosts, is really, it was 4th place hosts, is really not up to their very high standards.
Yeah. Not so much in the Copa America. I mean, they won the title in 2019, which if there was talk of a slump, that kind of ended that. But yeah, I do think Brazil is very hungry for another World Cup. And they've kind of proven it in their play over the last little while. I'll see if you agree with this, but my sense is more sober attitude, a more down to business attitude, and a little less antics. There aren't a lot of players, when I say the word antics, who come to mind, but there is one.
Yeah, Neymar, absolutely.
Yeah, so I don't know. He's a bit older now. I think we can maybe expect a few antics in the cup, like taking dives and stuff like that. But on the whole, I think Brazil has been really businesslike in this period. I think you noted in the team podcast that even when they had assured qualification for the World Cup here, that they were still steamrolling everyone as if they wanted to keep going right to the end.
Yeah, their record in qualification was really stunning. It's such a difficult group, like you said. They really overran the competition, and I think they kind of have needed that approach. I mean, historically, playing Brazil, it didn't get much tougher than that. But they've only won, the last World Cup coming in 2002. People haven't viewed Brazil the same way, with quite the same fear. And I think they need to just to focus, to work really hard to try and get back to the level of a team that is the most successful on the world stage.
Yeah, and I would say in recent Copa Americas and in especially this qualifying campaign, we've seen that. So it'll be interesting to see if they are the same way in the cup. But I would say the biggest, the most outstanding issue for Brazil is the notable lack of issues. Not much controversy, not much infighting. they are rotating positions, but I don't hear players kind of whining about how much starting time they have. Do you have a sense of that?
No, I think you're right. The business like is correct. They lost the final in the 2021 Copa America. That's really kind of the only glitch on their record. They've just been so consistent. Um,
Yeah,
and
it almost justifies the use of the word awesome, Connor.
yeah,
Awesome.
often overused, I would say, but they have been awesome.
Well, let me tell you about the word awesome. I mean, like awe-inspiring. Something that we say is awesome should be something that, like, we are seeing God before us, God in action before us. It's a tremendous waterfall thundering down in front of you. It's an amazing starry night sky. It's not getting 86% on a quiz.
I do agree with you.
Okay, sorry, I lost my head a little bit there. One of the other, again, these are not issues but notes, but we've alluded to it in the player-by-player section that we're seeing more of a kind of a rotation of a couple or three players rather than set starters. And we can use goalkeepers as an example. In the 2019 and 2018 World Cup, we saw one player starting all the games. In the 2021 Copa America and in the game since, we see more a position being shared between two players. Did that strike you, Connor?
It does strike me as a bit unusual, but I think in the 2014 or 2018 World Cup, you might be able to correct me, the one where Neymar got injured, it kind of unsettled Brazil, as it did, as we talked about earlier, when Thiago Silva got injured or was suspended for the semifinals in 2014. So I think the fact they're rotating players in should, ideally make them less susceptible if they lose a star or key member of the squad. So I think it's actually a good thing that they are rotating.
Yeah, that's a really interesting observation. I mean, we saw it actually. We had difficulty kind of putting players as definite candidates because even some of the players who you would kind of intuitively think would be definite only played maybe 7 or 8 of their 13 games. So we have a lot of players at the likely level who are probably definite candidates. It's only, I think, Marquinhos and Paqueta who had more than 10 of the 13 games as a starter. So that was kind of interesting as we went through the players. Okay, we'll just make a note on the formation and consistency, variety. Do you want to talk to that, Connor?
Yeah, so it's always 4 at the back, as we mentioned. Go ahead.
No, you go. I thought I took you by surprise.
Sorry. Yeah, it's always 4 at the back. The midfield and forward lines, though, they alternate between really 3 formations. That's a 4-4-2, a 4-3-3, and a 4-2-3-1. So it's the number of midfielders and forwards varying. Yeah, and they kind of, especially the 4-4-2 and 4-2-3-1, they've kind of used basically equal numbers of time since the 2021 Copa America.
Right, and a bit more than the 4-3-3 formation. The next kind of general point is they, and maybe this is a bit of a personal observation, but I find that Brazil doesn't have a lot of big egos on the squad. And sometimes I find this kind of undermining European squads a little bit, but with the possible exception of Neymar, most of the players seem fairly subdued and kind of quietly go about their business. And I think this actually allows them to rotate players without the players getting upset about how many starts they're getting or, insisting on being starters. So as we saw, Paqueta and Neymar usually start, and Neymar when he's healthy, because he missed a few games, but it was due to injury, and Marquinhos probably. But all of the other players seem to be satisfied enough with playing half of the games or slightly more than half. What do you think?
I think it shows that they're buying into the system that the manager has set, where you're on a big a country like Brazil. There's going to be good players around you, and I think people have to accept their role within the team, and yeah, if people can do that and put a team first mentality first, and I think that makes Brazil more dangerous than they are just by the individual star players and star talent that they
Yeah.
have.
All right, and then one more point, which I was kind of excited to introduce to you and our listeners to see what you thought of it. Brazil seems to handle newer, younger, hot candidates a bit differently than other teams. Most teams would kind of insert them into the starting lineup right away, not always for the better, by the way. But with Brazil, it's so tough to make it into the squad that some of these new and players who are on fire. I'm thinking right now of Newcastle's Humares or Arsenal's Martinelli or Rafinha, who's been playing for Leeds and Barcelona. Some of them last year were very hot. All of them are off to a good start this season. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to get a start ahead of the established veterans. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, there are some players, some real veterans on Brazil that have been around for a while and are still playing well. So, in general, I certainly agree with your point that there's a lot of younger players knocking at the door, but I think Brazil has been kind of wise with how they've introduced them. They've gone for a bit more stability, trying to give some players chances, but it's not kind of always being distracted by the newest, shiniest player and trying to find room for them. So I think it's always hard to crack into Brazil's squad. But I think they're kind of trying to fold players in as opposed to rush them in. And I think that's, again, they're probably better for it.
Yeah, nicely put at the end there. Yeah, so I think we'll see these players coming in as substitutes, maybe getting starts because of an injury or getting starts in B team games. But I think perhaps some kind of new soccer fans will be like, well, wow, this guy is tremendous for his club team. Why am I not seeing him starting? It's amazing.
Yeah, I agree with that. And they will still rely on players that are based in Brazil, which is important too. It's not only European players who are making the squad.
Right. Well, that's a nice transition into the next section. And do you want to talk about their club affiliations, or shall I do?
Yeah, I'll talk about the club affiliations, and if you have anything to add, certainly go ahead.
You bet.
With Brazil, like some of the top teams, it's really just a who's of big clubs. Brazil has players playing in a lot of different leagues, but all on top clubs. So you have Real Madrid and Barcelona, you have PSG, Juventus. In England, you have Liverpool, Chelsea, Manchester United, Man City, Arsenal, Tottenham. So really, kind of in all the big clubs, they Brazilian players are there. But they also have some players from the Brazilian domestic league, which is quite strong, of course. Not always kind of the biggest name players, but I think it's good for Brazil that those players still get a chance and they don't necessarily need to move to Europe to feel that they need an opportunity.
Yeah, I think the Brazilian attitude is not so much that the best teams are in Europe, more that the money is in Europe. So if those players can go and play in Europe during their prime, they'll kind of maximize their potential as money earners. And then we've seen a few of them kind of move back to Brazil in their retiring years. And of course, all of them coming from those teams in the first place, and maybe spending the first couple of years with the Brazilian clubs to develop their reputation. So kind of an interesting model, but a model that most of the players seem to choose. Hey.
Yeah, I agree that starting in Brazil with a youth club, going to Europe and then coming back in Brazil is kind of a well-trodden path for many Brazilian internationals.
Yeah, one player came back to Mexico, which kind of baffled me a little bit, but Let's move on to our next section, and this deals with age, experience, and a couple of statistics I've been working on. So one of the things I examine is how many players are kind of on the board for them, and that really is players who have played since 2021. So we see, and the best way to understand these statistics is by comparison with other teams. So we see that there are a few teams, especially the CONCACAF teams, I got to say, USA, Mexico, and Costa Rica, but also Ecuador, that are dealing with a huge number of players, more than 60 players who have played for them over the last couple of years. And it looks like those teams would have a bit of a selection difficulty in having to reduce it to 26. But Brazil is a very reasonable number of players, 46 players, and the average is about 50. So, yeah, it seems like they don't, as you said, shiny new players. They don't kind of bring on every shiny new player for Brazil, which would be hundreds of players, frankly, and kind of try them out in the squad. Rather, they seem to use the club process as a bit of a selection, and they really have to do well for their club to even get a sniff at the Brazilian club. Is that how you would interpret the low number of total candidates?
Yeah, I think it's exactly what you said. It's a really high bar to get into the squad, and once you're there and you've proven yourself for the Brazilian team, I mean, then you have a chance of getting more for running the team.
Yeah. Okay, and then the other two statistics, as far as Brazil goes, are not very significant. We have total players under consideration, we say. So we say the definite, likely, and possible candidates. And the average there is 33, and Brazil is at 34. So I don't think there's anything we can really draw out of that, unless you have something to say, Connor.
Nope. Yeah, bang average for Brazil.
Yeah, and the same with the next one. So definite and likely categories, the average is 21. Brazil is a little bit higher at 23. So we can pretty much be sure that most of the definite and likely players are going to make the squad. That would only leave 3 spots for the possible players that we talked about. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, there may be a couple surprises, and of course, injuries can and will play a role. But yeah, I think they've haven't experimented too much, which gives a pretty good core of players that we think they'll be selecting from.
Yeah, I think it's a strength in their case that that it's a very solid group of players that's not going to change much in the lead up to the cup. So maybe a couple of players introduced in the late September games, but I don't expect to see more than a couple. You may be interested in the average age, Connor. The average age is 27.6. The average is, 25 to 27, but actually in this World Cup, it's a bit higher than normal. 26.8 seems to be the average. And Brazil is, I believe, the oldest squad here. No, Iran is 27.7. So Brazil, the second oldest squad. Anything to say about that?
Yeah, I guess going through the players, not surprised are on the older end, because we have seen a couple of veterans, you know, that have been around for a while still anchoring the squad. Thiago Silva most notably. So again, in Brazil's case, we know they have young players that they can call on. I think it's an experienced squad, and I don't see the slightly higher average age really working against them at all.
Yeah, actually, I see here that like Dani Alves is 39 and Thiago Silva is 38. So even those two numbers in themselves may raise the average. I think actually in terms of players over 30 years old, there are teams that have quite a few more than them. And the players that Brazil has that are over 30 years old are usually 30, 31, or 32. So certainly not a worry, and Brazil has the talent. A team like Costa Rica is maybe relying on the older players because they can't find other players to replace them. But for Brazil, if you're on the team at 38, it means you're still performing really well at 38. Okay, well, the average number of caps, well, given that they have so many veterans, we would expect this to be on the high level. And it is 31.1 and the average is 29. So actually not as much as I would have thought. But they do have quite a few younger players balancing out that. And again, it's hard to kind of make it onto the squad. I think I'll just jump forward to total goals 186. And I got a new stat here that I've been working on, Connor, and it is goals per cap. Goals per cap. And just to put it in context, the average is 13. Oh, sorry, I'll make this a percent. The average is 13.7%, but Brazil is the highest among all teams at 17.6%. So that's just an incredible scoring ratio. For comparison, we have Germany at about the same level. Germany and Argentina are 17.5%, and the next closest is France at 16.8%. So even 1% makes a big difference. A very high scoring team.
Yeah, and goals from kind of lots of different players as well.
Yeah, we usually kind of look at the percentages of players. We'll take a quick look at that here, but I don't really want to dwell on it too much. But we have of course, Neymar with that 66 goals in 121. Oh, sorry, 75 goals. 75 goals in 121 games I have here, but we had 66 in the player by player. So maybe I got to check that out. But yeah, I don't think we need to make much of a case that Brazil has scoring power.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So let's move on. And actually, in terms of players and issues to watch, I said above that, one of the most notable things is the lack of notable issues. And you'll see that here. We could say for every position something like this. For goalkeeper, is it going to be Alisson or Ederson? But I'll make short work of that by saying that for almost every position, they've been rotating players. So we might have one player, in this case, Alisson seems slightly more likely than Ederson, but what's really true is that they'll probably rotate in the cup, maybe even the third string keeper getting a game. And rather than going through that choice for all the positions, I think we're going to find that there's a couple of candidates for each position.
Yeah.
So we'll move on to the midfield, and we've already talked about this point. This is not necessarily a midfield thing, but since most of the hot new players are midfielders, I'm going to say look for those hot new players not as starters, but as coming in as substitutes. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's kind of how Brazil gives opportunities to players to crack into the squad. But I think especially for the World Cup, where there's not really about experimentation, you'll kind of see some of the players who got them there, and especially through such an impressive qualification campaign.
Yeah. They may come in for a B team game also, or to replace an injured player, but I wouldn't expect to see the hot names as starters. And finally, on the attack, are we going to see Neymar's antics in this World Cup, Connor?
I hope he's matured a little bit. Certainly he's dominated for some wrong reasons in previous tournaments. I think it's a little bit in his personality. Some of the diving and stirring up trouble. I'm not sure he's fully beyond that. I'm sure he'll have several of his own headlines, as he always seems to.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I have in my notes here, likely to infuriate and amaze in this cup. Okay, let's look at some of the new players. Do you want to introduce the names? And I'll just add a little bit, but we won't go through the whole bio here because we did talk about them in the player by player. But we basically, kind of proving how tough it is to get onto the squad, we just have 2 definite candidates, 1 likely candidate, and then a host of possible candidates. Sorry, I'm saying candidates. I should be saying newcomers.
Yeah. So the 2 definites we have are Anthony with Man United and Rafinha.
Yeah, and as I say, we won't go into detail unless something needs to be said. How about the likely?
Likely we have 1, and that's Mateus Cunha, the Atletico Madrid forward.
Right. And all the rest of them are just at the possible level.
Yeah, so 2 goalkeepers, Everson and Santos.
Right, and we don't really expect these ones to make the squad, especially the goalkeepers.
Yeah, center backs we have Lucas Verissimo and Gabriel, who plays with Arsenal.
That's right, and as we say, probably just 3 of these possible candidates or so will make the squad. So I would say the odds are kind of against them, although a few of them will.
Yeah, Alex Tellez and Guillermo Arana are both left defensemen.
Yeah, and Alex Tellez is actually 29 years old, but if he makes the squad, this would be his first tournament. That's why we have him here.
Yeah, a couple central midfielders in Gerson and Bruno Guimaraes, the Newcastle player.
Again, well, no, you keep going.
And then 2 young attacking players, both 21, Gabriel Martinelli and Rodrigo, Real Madrid.
Right. Okay, so we probably won't see all of those players and probably will see a couple of them. And let's move on to injuries. Right now, they only have just the one, and that's to Guillermo Arana, who is just a possible candidate. So Brazil, so far so good as far as injuries go. He was injured in mid-September, and he has an unknown return date on a cruciate ligament injury. I'm no doctor, but I do think that's a bit of, or can be a long-term injury. Do you have any insight?
Yeah, certainly can be. That's one of those injuries that does take a while to come back from.
Yeah, well, as a possible candidate, it wouldn't be a huge loss for Brazil, and they certainly have enough players to cover that. Let's go through the notable absences. And again, we could mention countless Brazilian players who are strong for their club teams, and some of those never even get a sniff at the national team. So the first candidate we have here, Douglas Luiz, is a bit of a representative example. Played a few games for the Cup, and one of the few actually who did get a tryout with the national team, but it was kind of brief. They tried him out and he doesn't seem to have made it. That would be the story of a lot of Brazilian players. So we'll begin with Douglas Luiz, but most of these are basically players retiring. Do you want to take us through them?
Yeah, Willian is certainly in that camp.
Yeah, he was part of the 2019 Copa America, but that was his last tournament, so he's been off the team for a while.
Yeah, 2 attacking players who are not retired, Everton and Roberto Firmino.
Yeah, Everton with a bit of a sudden exit from the team because did really well in the 2019 Copa America and was a kind of a rotating starter in 2021. But is rather suddenly off the team. And Robert Firmino, again, will be a surprise to some, but that's the quality of player that to leave off the squad. Okay. Yeah, we should probably put him in the same category as Everton and Firmino. So not kind of gone for good, but was a starter in the 2021 Copa America and then kind of suddenly off the squad. So a possibility of coming back, but kind of abruptly off the squad after looking like he was making inroads.
Yeah, Casio Ramos, goalkeeper, is the next name.
Yeah, he was the backup goalkeeper for the 2018, probably the third string keeper for the 2018 World Cup and the 2019 Copa America, but those were his only two tournaments, and now hasn't been heard of since the 2019 Copa America. The rest are actually players. We do have some listeners who kind of follow the team from World Cup to World Cup. So we're going to mention a couple of the bigger names who were on the World Cup squad in 2018, but sometime between then and now have retired or drifted off the squad.
Yeah, that includes Joao Miranda, who we talked about, Marcelo, the former Real Madrid fullback, and Paulinho.
Yeah, so some pretty big names, but again, Brazil has no problem replacing those names. Okay, well, let's finish with a prediction of starters. It might work a bit differently for Brazil since we've been talking about rotating players quite a bit. So I'm going to use yellow for players who we think will start some of the games kind of in a rotating situation. So let's go. Do you think manager Tite is going to be there, Connor?
Well, he's been around for 6 years, so we don't expect a change at this point.
All right. Well, we'll put him as a starter. Do you have an opinion? Okay, I'll maybe mention the definite and likely candidates and let you offer an opinion. So we have Alison Becker as a definite candidate, and Weverton and Ederson as the likely candidates. Do you see a starter there?
I mean, I think Allison, you mentioned, started about 3/5 of the game, so we could see rotation, but I think Allison is going to be the starter, at least in game one.
Okay, we'll go with that. I think it's going to be a rotation, but as you say, we usually nominate the game one starter as the starter. But really, I think it'll be a rotation with Allison and Ederson. Okay, let's move on to defenders. Sorry. Shall I name them and then you offer an opinion? We have Marquinhos as a definite, and as likely Eder Militao and Thiago Silva.
Yeah, Marquinhos is being kind of as close to ever present as Brazil has had in its squad since 2021. So I think Marquinhos will start, and I do see him partnering Thiago Silva, who's still playing regularly and well for his club team.
Yeah, I'll go along with that. I think, again, it will be a bit of a rotation among the three, but Marquinhos and Thiago Silva do seem to be the two top dogs there. And again, we're talking about two positions here. They'll probably bring, I would say, about 5 players. And so we may see a bit of rotation in that position. For left backs, we have only Alex Sandro as a likely candidate. Which means they'll probably bring Alex Telles as a possible, and Guillaume Arana is injured. What do you think will go on there?
Yeah, I think we'll see Telles probably come with the squad, but I think Alex Sandro will be the starter. He seems to be the most likely and kind of the one to have nailed down that position the most.
Yeah, given the candidates that we have here, I'd have to agree. We actually haven't seen any, say, central defenders move over into that position, although to me, Alexandro hasn't played quite enough for me to be confident he's a starter, but we'll have to see. For right back, though, we do have more kind of players who have started a bit more. I think Danilo and Dani Alves as likely candidates, Emerson Royal as a possible.
Yeah, good competition here, but I think Danilo is the one I would give the nod to.
Okay. I actually wouldn't be surprised, even though they haven't done it yet, I wouldn't be surprised to see one of these players actually move over to the left. Defensive and central midfielders, for definite, we have Casemiro and Fred. And for likely, we have Fabinho. and they'll probably bring more than 3. What do you think?
Yeah, the player I'm most confident for starting is Casemiro.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you consider, looking at Fred or Fabinho, do you consider one of them more likely, or even for Casemiro to have a partner?
Yeah, again, yeah, you just brought up the issue. I was going to say that the formation changes there in the midfield. So sometimes it's 1, sometimes it's 2. When it's 2, it's Fred. But when it's 1, it's usually Fred playing as a left midfielder. So I would say Fred ahead of Fabinho.
Okay, I'm satisfied to put Fred as a starter.
All right. Well, we haven't used our yellow yet, but actually, I do think there'll be more rotation than we've made out here. Are you? We have Lucas Paqueta. He's a definite candidate here, and we put him as a versatile midfielder, even though he's nominally an attacking midfielder. I'll just say, do you see him as a starter?
I do, and some people may be surprised by that, especially those not, haven't followed his career. But they always seem to find room for him, as you mentioned. He's kind of played extremely consistently, so I think Lucas Paqueta will continue to start for Brazil.
I think so too. Not necessarily sure where he'll start, but he over the past period since the World Cup has started more games than anyone on the squad. So I think we have to put him as a starter. For right midfielders, they don't use the position that much, but they use left wingers and left attacking midfielders more. So we'll kind of look at the attacking end of the squad with the left wingers and the forwards. And we have Vinicius Jr. as a definite candidate, Richarlison as likely, and then the young and kind of hot. I don't mean that in a sexual sense. I mean it as in good form, Gabriel Martinelli, but only as a possible candidate here. Do you see any starters there?
Yeah, not really. I think it will be one of Vinicius Jr. or Richarlison, but I'm not sure who. I'm not sure how often they play together. But yeah, I'm not confident to call a starter there.
Yeah,
What are
me
your
neither.
thoughts?
I think of the two, Vinicius Jr. probably the more likely, but again, I think it'll be a bit of a rotation where both of them get some starts. And I think Gabriel
Yeah,
Martinelli
I
will
agree.
probably come in as a substitute. Okay, for right wingers, we have Anthony and Rafinha as definite candidates and Rodrigo as possible.
Again, I think we'll probably see rotation there as well. It's interesting that position has kind of younger players and players who aren't as well established with the squad. It's the first tournament for all of them. So there's a bit of kind of competition there. So yeah, again, I think probably Anthony and Rafinha the most likely, but not confident.
Yeah, we did see a lot of players rotating into that position in the Gold Cup and the first half of World Cup qualifying. And then these two players kind of seemed to nail it down a little bit more towards the end. But I agree with you. Right now, it looks like it would be one of the two players, but it would be difficult to say which one. And we kind of know that Brazil seems to be going with the rotation system. Okay, we have Philip Coutinho as a likely attacking midfielder, but do you see him as a starter?
I don't. I think that position is more likely to be filled by Paqueta or possibly some of the other attacking players.
Yeah, me too. Among the forwards, we have Neymar as definite, Mateus Cunha and Gabriel Jesus as likely.
I think it's interesting that Gabriel Jesus wasn't taken for the last 4 matches. So that means I don't think he'll be a striker, though if there is 2 up front, then he's a good shout for it. But Neymar is a definite starter, and I wouldn't be confident enough about anyone else.
Yeah, me too. I'm a bit surprised that Gabriel Jesus has started as little as he has, and as you said, kind of not even called up for the last few games there. I'm sure he will be called up to the Brazil squad, but again, any other team in the world would have him as a starter, but not necessarily Brazil. So again, maybe I'll put him in yellow because I think he'll start a few games. Do you think?
I think it's possible, and I think he is probably one of the more likely candidates if they decide to go with two up top. He could be the person who will partner Neymar at the top of the field.
Yeah. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of this media cast. So keep in mind, we'll be doing an update as new information comes out, and that will probably be in early to mid-November when the teams have published their final squad lists.
Yeah, and meanwhile, keep an eye on us at Soccerphiles Canada. That's Soccerphiles with a PH in the middle and an S at the end. And our website, soccerphiles.captivate.fm. And check our show notes for links to our website and previous podcast series.
Okay, and we hope we will see you next time. Bye-bye for now.